Okay, everybody, we are starting. I want to welcome everybody. We're right on the hour. We want to start on time. We know a lot of people have travel plans and other things for this weekend and this coming week. But we felt like this was such an important topic. So I want to welcome you to today's discussion. I'm Jill Shimoleski, and I know so many of you know my guest, Dr. Phyllis Bronson, my incredibly, which I keep like just singing your praises, Phyllis, because not only are you brilliant and you are a biochemist and we've put your bio and we will link your bio and people know because they've signed up for the webinar, but you constantly bring us back to the science and the biochemistry and how these molecules work in the body. And I think for women, it is so reassuring to have someone who is so seasoned in this, in the science, to actually bring it back for all of us to not be afraid of our hormones. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm so grateful to you.
I'm really happy to be here with you, Jill. You're a marvelous host, and your knowledge is pretty extensive, impressive. Should I jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention why we decided to do it, and then I'll have you
Go
jump in
ahead.
and you can kind of piggyback. So the reason we put it together so quickly really was because you guys know there was an announcement last week about the upcoming removal of the black box warning, which was great. We're all happy to see that. And so I think one of the things I was not anticipating was within about 2 days, I think I had 200 plus messages between Instagram and my email, people forwarding posts, forwarding things that were being said on Instagram that were not positive. Many people saying, "Yay, we're so happy." And then there was this huge backlash where it was almost like this doctor is saying this influencer is saying this, and basically saying, fear, fear, fear estrogen. Just because the warning is coming off does not mean you should be using estrogen. Here's all the reasons why. So there was a lot of what I think of as like, we're going to double down now on this fear-based messaging. And so, Phyllis, I'll have you jump in, but that was really the impetus because so many women are like, I've got the prescription. I was super excited. And now I feel even more fearful than I did before, which is crazy. So I'll let you take it away from there. But if that sort of sets the stage for why we're doing this now.
Well, rather than take it away, I hope we can go back and forth as we are
Yes.
becoming very accustomed to doing.
Yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
I'm brilliant in a narrow domain. I know the molecules. I like to introduce myself. I'm up here in the mountains in Colorado. It's snowing, which I love. I like to introduce myself also as saying I'm a biochemist, I'm a scientist, and a ski bum. That's why I'm up here. But I spent a great deal of time at the University of Denver over the years with my scientific father, Dwight Smith, who was the chair, the emeritus chair of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. He was also former chancellor of the university. And I would literally sit at his feet and just soak it up. I would spend about 4 days a month down there, and this is what we spent years doing, studying the very molecules I'm going to address today. So, and I love the coming of winter. I look outside, it's gray and dark, it's starting to snow. And so many of the women I've worked with over the years, because for many years we had a big clinical practice in mood biochemistry and hormones, even though my major focus for 27 years has been on the biochemistry. But most of the women would tell me how they love the sun and they get sad when it's dark, and I'm the opposite. I'm a fiery girl. I need the dark. So we have a good day to do this. So
Yeah.
let me jump in with a couple of things. When Jill
Yeah.
asked me if we could do this impromptu, I was right because I'm really disturbed by what I'm seeing with influencer energy in medicine. I don't think influencer energy is good in any field, in politics, in economics, and in medicine particularly. And the reason is because women are each unique. We're all an N of one. That means an experiment of one. And to have these young doctors going out there and telling everybody how it is, I find it very disturbing. And so I want to address that today and correct some biochemistry. I want to start off. I want to start off by being a little bit mean. Not only Not only do the three particular doctors that have been brought to my attention in the last few months, and there are others, all claiming to be experts, none of them have background in hormones. They're either urologists. Hormones are not part of the curricula for urology. They get a smidgen and then they decide they're experts. Most OBGYNs are poorly trained in bioidentical hormones, if at all, and don't know the biochemistry. And they can be very good doctors, OBGYNs, but they're not particularly trained in what we're going to talk about today. And you have certain distinctions in science and medicine. So in science, when you're doing research, and it's critically important to include how damaged things have been, we absolutely need solid basic science in order to do great things. But what has happened is people get latched on to certain ideas, and then they become an influencer, and they put out things that are biochemically incorrect. And there's one who did this last year. She wrote a book claiming that there's a newness to menopause in her version, and she wrote that topical transdermal progesterone is not absorbed. And then the two others I'm going to speak about without naming them said the same thing. Well, let me just say that every single doctor on the Institute of Bioidentical Medicine board, on hormone grand rounds that meets every week, every single doctor uses transdermal bioidentical progesterone. And the reason is because we have years of women getting calm without getting sleepy. But when I heard what this woman said in a talk, the one who claims to have discovered perimenopause, it was so sad because I got so many calls from patients and women who know my work saying, what is she talking about? It's the only thing that got me off of years of Xanax addiction. And I'm not going to go deeply into progesterone at the outset here because we have a lot to cover. But just anybody who really wants to know the progesterone biochemistry should listen to our last webinar with Jill on what most menopause doctors miss about progesterone, missing the mark on progesterone because, and I'll give you a very brief recap, transdermal progesterone is absorbed into the epidermis and converts almost instantly to the neurosteroids, notably allopregnanolone. It happens, 80% of the progesterone is converted almost immediately. And there's enough left over of straight progesterone to protect the endometrium, which is almost always enough to do that. But it should be checked by a qualified doctor. Occasionally the endometrium needs to be checked. And if there's any issue, there should be investigation. In 27 years, we've had 2 women with issues, endometrial issues. So this needs to be talked about. The reason these young doctors, younger than I am, who are not nuanced in biochemistry, say things like transdermal doesn't absorb is because with transdermal, 80% is converted to the critical allopregnanolone almost instantly, and the allopregnanolone then lines the membranes that then exaggerate or help accelerate the chloride ionic channel, which is the neuroinhibitory channel, and that's the mechanism by which we get calm. Okay, with oral, when women swallow progesterone, they get sleepy generally before they get calm. Any form of bioidentical progesterone is fine. Okay, it's personal preference, but I want women to be very clear about the difference. You cannot measure what isn't there.
Yeah.
So when these young doctors, notably the one that spoke last year and wrote this in her mediocre book, Had some decent information, nothing new, but that I could see. But, women responded to her. Why? I don't know, but there was a response in her age group. But the response that I heard was mostly negative because she didn't know the chemistry of progesterone, which, according to the International Menopause Society, is the most important molecule for most women across the board. And by not knowing the biochemistry, you endanger women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's my concern with these influencers saying things like transdermal progesterone doesn't absorb, because when you do oral and you measure blood, you can get to 6 nanograms, which is the measurement for progesterone, and that'll protect the endometrium. Okay, this is a false equivalency, because with transdermal you can't measure the leftover 20% and get to 6 nanograms, even though in all the intricate biochemical literature, it will talk about the extremely brilliant and nuanced biochemistry that allows transdermal to do its job, get women calm instead of sleepy, and still have enough to protect the endometrium if women are using enough in the first place. With oral, the half-life is pretty short. In other words, you swallow it, it goes through the liver first pass, and then it's pretty much at its half-life, I think it's something like 15 to 18 minutes in the first spike, but then it's like another 48 hours before the second full spike happens. So my point being, even though it's absorbed in the liver, it's a slower process after that.
Yeah.
And so you get the conversion to allopregnanolone and other neurosteroids that get women pretty sleepy, and that's the biggest side effect. Okay, and it's useful for insomnia. We just had a brilliant lecture by Geraldine Pryor at Grand Rounds this week, an 80-year-old doctor who has spent her life studying progesterone in British Columbia at SEMCOR. And her whole life has been studying progesterone. Now, she uses oral. She uses 300 milligrams as her average dose. And I wasn't there to correct her. I thought her lecture was brilliant and scholarly. And I learned too.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the way we use progesterone, because our women want the calmness. And so we dose, higher than that, often 200 to 600 at night transdermally. We also use compounded suppositories. And then during the day, if women are anxious, 100 milligrams an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
As needed. Okay.
Yeah.
You can't, it's very hard to overdose on progesterone, is my point, but you're not going to get to 6 nanogram endometrial protection,
Yeah.
which
In the
is,
blood. Right.
it's an arbitrary measurement. It doesn't mean anything contextually when you're looking at an individual woman who has great endometrial health and has never touched oral progesterone. Okay.
Yeah, no, that was important. We have to recap that over and over because I think that is lost
It's lost.
constantly.
Yeah.
And then they go back, people will go back out and hear it and they're like, but she said, and we're like, wait a minute, remember why it's not measured in the blood. So this is super important, Phyllis, for us to be talking about
So I
and
want you to,
correcting
yeah.
errors, right?
Yep.
Should we shift a little to, so the big kind of scare right now is, now it's like, okay, now everyone's afraid of estrogen, which everyone's been afraid of estrogen. And I think context has been, it's a proliferative hormone and that's where it ends. It'll be put out on social, it's proliferative, and it's being translated as to proliferation, meaning bad versus the good side of proliferation. And no context surrounding that, nothing
Exactly.
whatsoever. Yeah.
So in science, you cannot collapse domains, okay? Meaning, you have to look at where the molecule is working, what its job is, what its context is, how it lives in the female body. And so, there are two things I heard in addition to the progesterone nonsense that really have disturbed me recently. One is a doctor who considers herself a prime hormone expert came out and said that only horse urine Premarin was safe because that was the only one that had the double-blind randomized studies supporting its safety. Now, this is what I mean about collapsing domains. It's very important that you hear this. It's very important that anyone who knows doctors who think this way can hear this. Premarin, and I did the original molecular spectroscopy. I'm known in the scientific world for having done this with progesterone. We also did it with the estrogen spectra. We spent years trying to understand what it all meant. Premarin is conjugated horse urine estrogen, okay? The horses are bred to produce estrogen, all right? And they produce a molecule called equilin, which is horse urine estrogen. And they mostly produce estrone. What is it? 49 to 62% of Premarin is estrone salts, sodium salts of estrone. Estrone is the more toxic of the three estrogens, E1, thus the ONE on the end of estrone. So for this doctor to be spouting that Premarin is the only safe one when it's mostly the most toxic one, let me explain estrone chemistry. Each of the estrogens has a purpose, E1, E2, and E3. E2 is the most important biologically, that's estradiol, because it has the greatest impact on cognitive function, on mood in terms of as an antidepressant, and it is very significantly related to how the brain ages. If you don't have enough estradiol, you're going to age faster, and you're going to have much more cognitive decline. And so when we have E1, E2, and E3, what's so amusing to me as a chemist, as a biochemist, is that this black box warning was on vaginal estrogen. Most of my peers don't care about vaginal estrogen, most of them. I mean, it's fine for, localized lubrication. It's not systemic the way real estrogen is, which I've been using for 30 years, most of my peers have. Estradiol is critically important. It doesn't build new bone for the most part. It stops bone resorption. Progesterone builds new bones. And by the way, one of these influencers I was referring to is constantly spouting off about how estrogen for your bones, estrogen for your bones. Lately, she's been including the fact that estrogen does not build bone, it stops resorption. It's the osteoclast aspect that estrogen addresses, and progesterone actually builds bone. And it can do so at any age, by the way.
Yeah.
We don't know how much, but it can. And biochemically, it can. So that's the osteoblasts in progesterone that build bone. So estrone has gotten a bad rap because it's objectively a more difficult estrogen to understand. So let me preface what I'm about to say by telling you that the estrogen, I don't know if you can see the three estrogens here. Can you see that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want you to see that because these E1, E2, and E3. Okay, let me give you a little of the exquisite biochemistry. They exist as a series for a reason. We don't always know what the divine had in mind, okay? But there are reasons why things exist in our female bodies the way they do. And I think, and this is, what I'm talking about today is both my opinion as a scientist and that of my closest, best colleagues. We're not here to give you medical advice. I can't do that. I'm not a physician, nor would I even attempt to, because each of us is so individual. But years ago, when my original medical partner, Dr. Wickham, and I first brought bioidentical hormones here, we were going off Jonathan Wright's early work with the 10-10-80 ratios. He used E1, E2, and then 80% E3 estriol to get the ratios. And pretty early on, Dr. Wickham said, I don't see any purpose in using E1. And pretty soon it was dropped from the repertoire in general. And it became E2 and E3 in the compounding pharmacy world.
Which is biased, just so people know in case they're
Biased,
wondering.
right?
Yeah, it's biased. Yeah.
Which is the ideal formula, but not in the exact ratios that many are taught to think in. Our focus has always been that women get enough primary estrogen, estradiol, E2, the one in the middle, to handle their symptoms, okay? And then we add E3 when we compound it for some very important reasons that I'll get into. But it's not the most crucial aspect of what I'm talking about today. Estradiol is women can be very healthy hormonally without having access to estriol, even though I prefer it. I prefer it to be included, and there are some very significant reasons for that. But as long as a woman is using enough progesterone, which is the anti-proliferative molecule, that has to be used anytime estrogen is used.
Yes.
Which is why I reject these cycling protocols, the T.S. Wiley, Suzanne Summers type protocols that have women cycling high levels of estradiol to have a faux period. You don't need a period if you're not ovulating. It's ridiculous. I understand what they were trying to do. I disagree with it.
Yeah.
I think anytime you're using enough estradiol to make a difference, and that includes neurochemically, you need enough progesterone to counter the proliferative effect. And enough progesterone does not alter the neurochemical sequencing of estradiol. It just doesn't. It may slow down certain pathways, which can be good for women who are anxious, but it doesn't alter them. But you must have the anti-proliferative effect. Now, there's a lot of new information about how protective estradiol is, including in the brilliant new book by Jeffrey Dash, Bioidentical Hormones 101. I can hold it up here.
Yeah. I love the book.
Yeah, this is the most important book on hormones, Bioidentical Hormones 101. And this is, of course, I like to show my book, which is
Show your book. Yeah. And we'll put a link to that too. Yeah, it's a
it's
great
a cult
book.
classic,
Yeah.
And I have some other books to show you, which I will in a moment, that are not specifically about hormones, but I'll get to that because they're a very important component of how the female psyche actually operates. It's not just about take this, take that, take this, take that. And when I listen to some of these women today, because I'm so deeply aware of shadow energy, not only do I look at them and think, you need so much progesterone to get calm, to get out of this rabbit hole you're in, and whether they're pushing testosterone or pushing estrogen, if you don't have enough progesterone to get calm, it's very grating to be around that energy for me and for most of my close colleagues. I don't like being hammered at.
Yeah.
So, and it's daunting when you see that the North American Menopause Society, NAMS, has the same lousy biochemistry that it had 20 years ago when we were at the apex of our molecular research, and we had to hear from them. What we heard was that there's no difference between progesterone and progesterone. Well, we had the molecular spectra to show otherwise, and while Dr. Ken Hermsmeyer, who's one of the brilliant guys in the field, was doing the replicated study at the Oregon Regional Primate Lab, and was replicated at Wake Forest, showing just how exquisitely important the distinction between real progesterone and progestin is. I've talked about that study in the past. I won't take our time now,
Yeah.
but it was so graphic. And yet NAMS was saying, oh, there's no difference. And they're doing the same BS today by
Yeah.
saying transdermal progesterone doesn't matter, when we have literally gotten hundreds of women off their benzodiazepine addictions, biggest selling drugs in the world. We've gotten them off those addictions with the help of good medical intervention, because it has to be done properly, by adding enough progesterone.
Yeah.
And most doctors don't get it, and they way underdose progesterone, and they also underdose estrogen.
Yeah.
And there's good pharmaceutical estrogen. There's patches and, various dots and things. Straight estradiol, it is bioidentical. The problem for us, it doesn't have estriol, but it's still okay. Women, not only should they not be afraid of estradiol, they should embrace that it's available, because without it, you're going to go into cognitive decline.
Yeah.
90% of you.
Yeah.
And what happens as women age is that the follicular stimulating hormone, the FSH, rises. It's analogous to TSH rising with thyroid deficiency. I'm not going to go into that at all, except to make that analogy. I'm not a thyroid expert. But as the FSH rises, there's a kind of arbitrary standard that if you haven't had a period in a year and that FSH is over 26, you're in menopause. Would I say you should 100% trust that? You couldn't get pregnant? No, I don't 100% trust anything in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But there's enough good medicine to suggest that those numbers matter. But what's really important is if you look at a woman's chemistry who has not been on estrogen, and you look at the estradiol level in her blood, and blood is the gold standard in the research world, and I'll address that in a moment. But for this purpose, it's adequate. So the estradiol level is not high, and the FSH is rising. And the assumption is that if you use enough estradiol, you can bring down the FSH. Well, the woman desperately needs estradiol, but the thing that brings down the FSH is critical to mention. Because the FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone, when it gets way up there, and we see it in the 180s and up there,
Yes.
in older women who are declining, it's the oxidative stress in the brain. It's the rusting of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
It starts there. And so that cognitive decline happens, and we all know when someone shouldn't be driving anymore. But so much of it is linked to low estradiol. So why would anyone say you should only use Premarin, which is horse urine estrogen, because there are randomized double-blind placebo-controlled studies? That is not the gold standard in science. It is in pharmacology. And in pharmacokinetics, you need these studies if you're going to develop a new drug. I was recently invited to be at a seminar introducing a new drug. It was very interesting, new drug. I think it has inflammation. But a lot of the pathways they were discussing could be addressed with bioidentical hormones. I still think their drug looks interesting. There's a great deal of concern about heavy inflammation processes, since COVID in particular.
Yeah.
But they need a randomized study to get that drug across the finish line. It's very hard, it's very expensive. You cannot do that, again, collapsing domains to this doctor who doesn't know biochemistry. You cannot do a randomized study with molecules that cannot be patented.
Yes.
It's exorbitant. The FDA sets it up to make it impossible for anybody who isn't looking to get a drug to market. And, there are good drugs and bad drugs. And there are a lot of very mediocre drugs that serve very little purpose except to enrich pharma.
Yeah.
And I come from a very strong medical world in Boston. Most of my relatives were doctors, most of my aunts and uncles. I have huge respect for the best in medicine, and I have disdain for the arrogance. You know, I have a cousin who was part of the driving force for me to leave Boston because she was so arrogant about traditional medicine. And what they learn is, I mean, I'm not blaming her in case she happens to be
Yeah.
listening. She's a very good doctor. But the arrogance, you know, one of the required things that happens in medical school, they all take a course, whether it's innate or unconscious in the curricula. Arrogance 101, it's part of becoming a doctor. And you see it in these influencers. I know everything. I don't have to stand on the shoulders of people who've actually studied this for years.
Yeah.
I just reject that. I mean, I stand on the shoulders of the best scientists I know and continue
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And they're old white men for the most
Hmm.
part, some women. So when I look at the molecules, what I try to understand is what they mean in terms of application to our biology. So not only should we not fear estradiol, we should fear not having it. And we should fear Premarin. We should fear Premarin because it's mostly estrone. And the problem with estrone, we can go into deeply in a moment. Do you want me to stop for a minute and you?
Yeah, I know. I was just going to say it's interesting because I think, no, I'm glad you said just those, you saying the words, we should not fear estrogen. I think, I hope everybody takes a deep breath because I feel like part of, I know one of the physicians who I actually really think puts a lot of great stuff out there, but she, in the past 2 weeks in particular, has been saying many fearful things about estrogen, but also we should be scantily, I scantily use estrogen only when I feel like I have brain fog. And I feel like, again, it's that fear model of like these hormones do different things, and there's so much that's a family, it's a symphony. There's so it's everything is reduced to one soundbite and fear. And it seems to be very fear. So the fact that you even said it, Phyllis, I think is, women want to avoid it because they're so nervous about it.
I wouldn't be able to ski the way I do, and I'm still
Yeah.
rocking it. And
Yeah.
I hope to have a good season. I mean, I feel it's very integral to me having courage. You know, I we all get older. I mean, it's part of the dynamic of living. I'm not looking to anti-age, nor am I looking to have our patients anti-age. And I really reject having, quote, longevity doctors claim now to be hormone specialists when they have no background in it. Just throwing it in the soup. I'm an anti-aging doctor and I'm an expert in everything, including hormones. So to me, that's as disingenuous as urologists claiming to be hormone experts most of the time.
Mhm.
Not only does Jeffrey Dash cover, and I don't agree with everything in his book, but 80–90% of it is absolutely right on.
Yeah.
Chapter 19 covers why estrogen, estradiol, is critically important for women, including women who have had breast cancer.
Yeah.
And he writes about my work somewhere in there too, in chapter 15.
Yeah.
The book is brilliant. Anybody who wants the facts about how the chemistry works
Hmm.
should be reading that book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not only are the molecules misunderstood, but there's a reason why there's E1, E2, E3. This is the way nature formed it. I believe E1 and E3 form, if you will, a fence around E2. They protect E2 through chemical kinetics to help E2 stay functional. And
Mm.
that's something I've been looking at a lot lately. So when you see the chemistry of estrone, which I want to go into briefly, and then I want to talk about estriol, which is also an important part of the discourse of estrogen, to understand the dynamics. So E1, E2, E3. In chemistry, some of the most brilliant thinking is about kinetics and how things ultimately reside in the kinetic energy. So the reaction is driven forward, E1, E2, E3, by chemical kinetics. And that overrides the thermodynamics, which is what we are used to thinking in terms of the reactions that happen in the molecules. And it's like a person's soul overrides their ego.
Mm.
So, for lack of a better description, that's what just came to my mind. I mean, who a person really is says a lot more about them than what deal they accomplished today.
Yes.
Okay? And for me, because I'm passionate about the molecules and I've studied them for so many years, I refuse to be quiet about them when there's an opportunity to speak up. I have no interest in being an influencer. People beg me to speak up more. I speak up when it's appropriate. People who want the information, go to my website, phyllisbronsonphd.com, and look at
Many
the
articles
history.
that are excellent. Yeah.
Well, and the years of talks. I mean, I spoke numerous times for Abram Hoffer at the International Society for Orthomolecular Medicine in Canada, Vancouver and Toronto. We used to alternate year after year. He considered me his teacher on hormones. He was one of the most brilliant doctors looking at how nutrients impact psychiatry. He was a brilliant psychiatrist. Someday we should do a session on molecules of mood and emotion.
Yes. Yes.
So I spoke numerous times there. I spoke for the International College of Integrative Medicine, the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. During COVID, the International College of Integrative Medicine asked me to head a panel about why slightly older and older women need their hormones too. And it was a great panel. I think Jeffrey Dash was on there, David Brownstein, Carol Peterson. And we brought it alive, I'm not doing that kind of speaking now. I'm not traveling to those meetings, and they're not as robust as they used to be. I also have an anxious puppy and kids coming and going. So I'm mostly here, and we continue to see the women we've seen for years, but we don't take new women. So I try to educate the best I can because I've done it, right? So
Yeah.
why on earth would we be pushing horse urine Premarin, which is 49 to 62% estrone, when, let me explain estrone a little bit, okay? Estrone is a difficult molecule. I'm not going to show you the picture because it's hard to see, but there's something called a carbonyl on the A ring of estrone that is adjacent or nearby to a carbon double bonded to an oxygen near a hydroxyl group, an OH group. And the reason I'm telling you this is because that formation is unique to estrone. And it makes the molecule more stable, which normally that sounds like a good thing. Not a good thing, because the toxic metabolites of estrone stay in the body longer than they would if there was not that unique chemistry, anchoring chemistry. Some people who have copied my work have said, one minor thing I've said, which is it also helps keep toxic metals in the body. That's a very minor point. Yes, I mean, it could because of free radical formation. But the main thing is that with that carbonyl and the hydroxyl formation, the breakdown of estrone to the toxic DNA interrupting quinones is significant. So we don't want that. Now, rather than throwing out the baby with the bathwater, I again come back to the fact that because the estrogen series exists as E1, E2, E3, I think there's a reason why E1 exists. I think it's an anchoring molecule. It helps E2 have its proper biochemistry, And as women age, their fat cells are bigger.
Mhm.
And that's true for all women as we age. Our fat cells are bigger and they contain more estrone because of the aromatization of androstenedione. And so that converts to estrone. And so women become more vulnerable because of that conversion to a more toxic estrogenic pattern. Why would we want to replicate that with Premarin, which is mostly estrone? It's mostly estrone. There's a little bit of estradiol, but we did the molecular spectra. I mean, I can look at it and say, oh, Premarin, estrone, same peak. And you know what? In the middle of the night the other night, when I usually wake up for an hour, like most of my women do, even if you have plenty of progesterone, I use more and I go back to sleep. I read the New York Times opinion pages. I don't usually read heavy stuff in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I read the opinion pages usually, and I remember things. And in the middle of the night, I remembered, oh yeah, wait a minute. Premarin and estrone both have the carbon double bonded to oxygen at 1700. We found that. We did that in our molecular spectra. Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy is the critical way to look at how molecules absorb infrared light and what that means in terms of how the bonds show. So when we look at similarities in the bonds, we can see similarities in the molecules as we did with Premarin and estrone. So there you have it. That's why Premarin, it's been so touted in the medical hormone world because of pharma's involvement. And even, in the last few years, there's an oncologist, Avram Blooming, who wrote the book Estrogen Matters. And he's used Prem Pro for years. And, I showed his book at a recent talk I gave out here. And I said, I don't like this book, but it's an important book.
Yeah.
It's an important book because even though he's incorrect about the big biochemistry, he's correct that estrogen matters. And when
Yeah.
his first volume came out, Jeffrey Dash wrote a great book review articulating why it was good and why it was bad. The second volume came out last year, and it's worse because he spends part of the first introduction, I think it is, I couldn't even read most of it, blasting compounding pharmacies.
Yeah. I never understood that.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
Nobody who knows about chemistry does.
Yeah.
And why on earth does he keep using synthetic progestin?
Yeah.
When,
I know.
according to, I think his basic premise is important. He helps women who have had cancer by giving them any estrogen is better than none. Okay. So he gives them horse urine estrogen. They get their moods back. That's a good thing. He started doing it with his own wife
Yeah.
years, years ago, after I believe she had been ill and was losing her mojo. So any estrogen is probably better than none. But to then continue to use synthetic progestin in the light of all the evidence we have now, starting with the Holtorf, Holtorf paper some years ago, not that long ago, exquisitely writing about why one shouldn't use progestins. And I used this in a talk I gave. The perception that synthetic progestins probably make estrogen more aggressive, whereas progesterone renders it less aggressive. And, you'd have to take a whole computer program for all of WebMD and all of it, PubMed, to get rid of all the errors in collapsing progestin and progesterone.
Yeah.
And for the sake of brevity here, I'm just going to say that only real progesterone is real progesterone.
Yeah.
And most of the birth control pills are synthetic progestin. and then this new Nestrellis that got a lot of attention at the recent NAMS meeting. It's not great.
Hmm.
Maybe a little bit better, and the formation of the progestin is not as toxic as some of the progestins, and it comes from, I think, spironolactone, and and yet it's the same progestin, I believe, that's already being used in a number of birth control pills. So I got so many calls about this. Why are they saying it's better? Well, I
Yeah.
think the combination is better,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
don't think it's great.
No.
And then I
No.
get a lot of questions about, well, what should we do about birth control? Well, we need to teach young people about safe birth control without it just being chemically based.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a conversation I want to get into now, but parents who think they're being protective of their young daughters by putting them on birth control pills early are setting
Hmm.
themselves up, are setting their young daughters up for a lifetime of anxiety in many cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what they really need is progesterone. Perimenopause starts at 22.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have two questions for you, actually. I was thinking as you were talking. So one is, if, to your point, women need estrogen, if midlife women and older women have these bigger fat cells and we're making estrone, if we don't bring estradiol in, right, do we want that estradiol too to sort of compete with estrone? So are we setting ourselves up to not use estradiol if we're not?
Hugely. And I'm really
Yeah.
glad I meant to say that. So I'm really glad
Yeah.
you brought that up. The way we have always overcome the tendency and the reality that women, as they have more fat, their fat cells, it's not that there are more fat cells, I think they're just bigger.
Yeah.
The way you overcome E1 is with more E2,
Yes.
and the brain fog clears instantly.
Yeah.
And so we have women who use a lot of progesterone at night. It's the only way they get calm. And David Rosensweet at Grand Rounds has finally, seen the light on this, but mainly because of, I think, Carol Peterson and Phyllis Bronson.
Yeah.
And he says it beautifully. He said, use enough progesterone until you get calm. And if you're groggy in the morning, cut back the next night. Full
Yeah.
stop,
Yeah.
period. And
Yeah.
so what we do is what we have here, we give women transdermal, here's our PM clicker.
Hmm.
We give them estriol, estradiol, and progesterone at night. And we give them extra progesterone because you can only put 200 milligrams in a compounded
Hmm.
combination. But we can use suppositories, and we use, in the morning, if they're groggy, extra estradiol. This is straight estradiol. And we have women who just need more, especially if their flat affect depression comes back,
Yeah.
because it can be cyclical. I talked to a woman the other day I have a lot of respect for, a brilliant artist, and she gets into that pattern sometimes. That old flatness comes back, and you know what we have found? Usually estradiol first. We bring that up a little bit. But one of the most beautiful things is pregnenolone. And because we've had to separate in the compounding pharmacy pregnenolone and DHEA out of the base formula, we always included it in some new regulation. So they have to get a separate small jar of DHEA and pregnenolone.
Hmm.
Some very interesting new research, and I think I could actually say data on the significance of pregnenolone.
Hmm.
It enhances the activity of estrogen, enhances the activity of all the hormones, and
Interesting.
it helps the hormones work more effectively with fewer side effects, if there are any,
Mm.
and it helps testosterone work more effectively. And how do I know that? Experiential. It's very safe to use these higher doses we've been using.
Hmm.
There's significant interest in pregnenolone right now for cognitive function, and we find that if that depression recurs, even if a woman's been doing well, increasing pregnenolone can really help.
Mm,
DHEA helps the physical energy, and pregnenolone helps the mental energy. And testosterone is beautiful for women,
yeah.
for mood. We've been using it for 20 years. It is not new.
It was interesting when you were saying about Premarin because I feel like still so much of what's talked about is it's like, well, the WHI, the WHI, the WHI. But as we're talking about these molecules, the molecules that we're talking about here today are so different than what was used in the WHI. So I feel like even going forward, everyone is still pulling the WHI data as part of their rationale for things. It's almost like it's just so different than what we're using in our body or what our body actually makes, that sort of breakdown, or that, as you said, we've got E1, E2, and E3. And no, we don't use progestins, right? We make progesterone. So how we've been able to even justify, I guess, pulling information from that study, I don't know. It's always kind of interesting to me because I feel like people still fall back on the WHI for
Well,
everything.
okay, so you move in a different world than I do, because in
Yeah.
my circles, nobody falls back on the WHI.
No,
All
I
the,
was,
all
yeah.
the best doctors, all the best scientists just look at that study, and we've been waiting, not not waiting with expectation for a particular outcome, just waiting to see it unfold bit by bit over the last 20 years, to where now it's fully acknowledged how flawed the study was
Yes.
by the
Yeah.
fact that it was mostly using Premarin, Provera, and there was no differentiation about the molecules early on, except the first unpacking showed that the women who only had estrogen, from whatever source, had less breast cancer than the women who use synthetic progestin. And then one of these influencers said, oh, there's no difference. I heard her say that in some talk, that, Premarin didn't cause the problems, but it did. It was the Prem Pro that caused the problems. And by
Yeah.
not pulling out the Pro, the data was completely flawed, right?
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
part of the study that showed less cancer was the part that had just the estrogen component. I think
Yeah.
it's all,
Yeah.
was it all Premarin? But so even though I don't like Premarin, it's infinitely better than Prem Pro,
Yeah.
because the Pro part, the Provera, actually makes the Premarin more carcinogenic. That's why it's very hard to understand anyone using it today molecularly. I don't get it.
Yeah.
And so when doctors call me and say, well, I use pharmaceutical estrogen, estradiol, straight estradiol is bioidentical. And I got a male doctor called me recently, who's a gynecologist, and he said, I want to give this woman a lot of progesterone, but I don't use compounding. I don't have access to estriol. What should I do? I said, well, I would recommend you find a compounding pharmacy, but
Mhm.
if you don't want to, just give her enough progesterone and use straight estradiol, no Premarin, no conjugated horse urine.
Yes.
Conjugated just means the molecules are altered in the liver first pass. But why would you want equilin, which is
Yeah.
native to horses? Plus, it's cruel to the horses.
Yes. Oh, it's terrible. Phyllis, do you feel like, do you want to talk I don't know if you don't mind, maybe, and you can bring in Dr. Wainwright here, but maybe talking a little bit about the alpha and beta receptors, because I think that also gets lost. And then I think this proliferate, 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 and then it's being sort of presented as proliferation means cancer. And there's so much there that that's where the scare comes in because it's proliferative. So maybe we talk about the receptors a little bit if you don't mind.
We should.
Yeah.
We should indeed. Dr. Wainwright wrote a very, very important paper. He wrote a very important paper talking about, I think it was published, one of his papers was in the Townsend Journal some years back, but he ran a foundation called the Halon Foundation, which was totally devoted to the importance of estriol.
Mm.
Now, I haven't spoken to the guy, it's been years following just stuff he's written, but it's brilliant. And he came up with this very important theory about estriol, And there was a Dr. Lemon also talking about this.
Yeah.
But Dr. Wainwright said there's a beta adiol chemistry that's connected to the estrogen receptor beta, which is an inherent component of our own immune systems. And it's molecularly identified as being not completely identical as estriol, but very similar. The beta adiol has that affinity for the beta receptor, as does estriol, as does fermented soy, which is a really exquisite cancer preventive molecule. Again, a great affinity for the beta receptor. And his work over many years strongly suggested that by using estriol, you are protecting that anti-proliferative aspect of the beta receptor. Now, estradiol, I will reluctantly say, has limited affinity alpha and beta receptors. Estradiol almost entirely goes to the alpha receptor.
Mm-hmm.
So to confuse the fact that a little bit goes to the beta receptor with being, well, you don't need estriol because estradiol does it all, it's not true. I used to say that E3 estriol was not biologically active, it was just a protective molecule. I no longer say that because there is a biological mechanism by which estriol does exert protection, and it has to do with that beta adiol chemistry. It is actually mimicking immune protection. And I think the fact that there are two hydroxyl groups adjacent on the estriol molecule help keep estradiol safe to do its thing. It's anchored on either side by molecules who have a different personal agenda, but their role is to be part of the estrogen spectra. It's estradiol, the estrogen series. It's estradiol that is the biologically important molecule in terms of cognition, in terms of so many functions, in terms of serotonin uptake. But it's the position of the various chemical bonds on these molecules that help render them having their own role. And so when we use estriol in our work, we always make sure a woman gets enough estradiol to handle her symptoms. And usually she's not getting enough if she's still depressed. And then we add estriol, and not in a ratio, we just add it. We just add it. So if she's getting, let's just hypothetically say a woman needs 3 milligrams of E2 in the morning, we add 2 or 3 milligrams of estriol.
Yeah.
Even 1 milligram gives you some of that chemistry. That's why we do it. But I want to be clear that I'm not adamant, because I have plenty of medical doctors who call me and say, well, if I use enough progesterone, which I've become very convinced about. I've had a lot of doctors tell me that, even in the last month since that last webinar, Jill. But I've had many over the years that are using progesterone. Now they're using a lot more. And if they ask me, do they have to have estriol? I say it's my preference, but it's not mandatory the way progesterone is. And, estradiol is proliferative. It's proliferative. That's part of the way the chemistry of estradiol works. That's what makes a fetus grow. Progesterone inhibits proliferation. You need both. You need...
Say that again. Even for the people that don't have a uterus, we need both, right?
Absolutely. I mean, some of the women who have done most brilliantly on progesterone are women who have been without a uterus for years and have been living on benzodiazepines for calmness. And even if they're afraid of estrogen, we get them started with progesterone. My medical partner was sitting here a while ago with a fabulous older woman, very wealthy, very at home in the world, incredibly anxious, had had cancer. And she said, I want to do everything you say except no estrogen. This was quite a few years ago. And she did well on progesterone. And then we added a little testosterone. She did better. She came
Mhm.
back. She said, I'm doing better, but I'm still depressed. And he said to her, I remember it vividly. It was incredible. My medical partner, who at that time, Chris, was an ER doc, and he's incredible with these women. I worked with Chris for a number of years, still am. And he said to her, you're never going to get out of this depression without some estrogen. I mean, we've helped you as much as we can with testosterone, progesterone. And she said, I'll try it. And it made all the difference. It made all the difference. And every time
Yeah.
she starts to fall back in, we just give her a little bit more, not a lot. And it's not even quantitative, it's getting enough. It's not a mandatory number, okay? It's getting
Yeah.
enough to get out of your symptoms. And the problem I have with these influencers is they don't have a biochemistry way of thinking. So they latch onto an idea, like they did at NAMS with transdermal progesterone can't be effective because you can't get to 6 nanograms. And I told this to Jill the other day. I think of the importance of including philosophy in science because I quoted Adam Grant from the University of Pennsylvania. He's a wonderful sociologist and philosopher, writer. And he wrote a book called, I think it was called Think Again,
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
And then last year he did an interview where he said, people get so married to an idea, and this is big in medicine, by the way. They get
Mhm.
married to an idea, and then when they find out that they might be incorrect, they don't turn around and say, oh my gosh, transdermal progesterone, this really is incredible what I'm learning. No, they double down. No, it
Yeah.
can't be okay because he didn't get to 6 nanograms. Well,
Yeah.
if you have to include other aspects in female psychology and what makes a woman whole. And I love to remind women it's not just having hormones. Hormones are the containers for our moods,
Mhm.
but we have to have moods to contain and things to contain that are worth containing. And if
Yeah.
you're just this brittle know-it-all when you're young, what's left?
Yeah.
There are a couple of great books I think women should know about. Do we have a minute?
Yeah, 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 we do. That's perfect. And I think the fact that you mentioned, again, estrogen,
Yeah,
that it is proliferative and the balance. It's really about not to say the balance, but estrogen and progesterone are they really are a partnership. They need to be together.
right.
And so this progesterone piece, and I think we heard Geraldine Pryor, was that, yeah, 2 days ago, which was just what she kept saying about it's so big for that anti-proliferative effect, but all of the other things as well. And I think if women are afraid of estrogen, remember, we use it with progesterone. This is that team that they really go together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also,
And
testosterone
testosterone.
is very important for helping to block an enzyme that increases proliferation. I think
Yeah.
it's the BCL2, and there's important research going on with testosterone. And I'll just include in that testosterone helps women become more decisive, okay? It helps men access their courage more, and it helps women become more decisive. I don't like mean girls, and I don't like men who are bullies. But some of these doctors are actually mean girls because by
Mhm.
ignoring the molecular chemistry and acting like you already know everything, you're being mean to people who have actually done the work, including me.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
being mean to my colleagues who every week for years meet and discuss these things. Why not avail yourself of
Yeah. To learn, right? To be
biochemistry?
open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know if I feel dropped out of the quote mainstream discourse on hormones, and right now where I live, they're doing a women's health series, and they've invited four heads of OBGYN departments. They never invited me. And it's laughable because these doctors have zero background in hormone research. And instead of feeling left out, which I could, I feel it's their loss if they don't want to avail themselves of this knowledge. I mean, they did it last year when they invited one of them who had wrong information. And did we get calls? Many, many, many. But that's okay because I know that the molecules tell a story. They do not lie, okay? And when you're dealing with science, you have to recognize that the two criteria that actually define science is it measurable, whether it's quantitative with numbers or qualitative with molecules, what you're looking at, the structures. And then number two is, can you replicate the evidence? And we've been replicating for 27 years.
Yeah. You're seeing it to your point too. Just again, that we talk about, there's so much talk in the medical field about the randomized controlled trials, and we need to have this double blind. And hormones are different. This is not approving a new drug. These are the molecules in our body that no one is going to take on to pay for a randomized controlled trial. So we have to use what we know about biochemistry, physiology, women's lived experiences to then say, we know that as you're saying, FSH rises. We know that it rusts the brain. We know these things. This is a fact. I'm sorry to hear that you are not invited to that because I feel that we need the people that really understand the biochemistry to pass it on. I'm hungry for this. And I think I just saw in the chat. Yeah. I love these talks. Oh, thank you, Chris, so much. Thank you for this talk. Thanks, you guys. I know we're going to wrap it in just a second. I want Phyllis to show the books, but thank you so much. I value this so much too. That's why I asked Phyllis if she would do
No,
this.
it used to be, we all have our shadow energy, right? That's
Yeah.
a term in Jungian psychology, which I'm passionate about. So for me, when I'm left out, which I have been forever from NAMS, and, I've been asked to speak at major scientific conferences. So for me, what's important is recognizing that I, I almost could say it's axiomatic that I would not be invited to something that's going to maintain the status quo and keep, pharma happy,
Yes.
and keep the traditional medical establishment that has been over many years largely funded by pharma, more in the journals today.
Yeah.
It's gotten a little better, but it's still that whole matrix. And I have high regard for the best of medicine, but it is not grounded in having high regard for the worst of how the
Yeah.
pharmaceutical industrial complex
Yeah.
infiltrates and how they lie. And
Yeah.
how they lie when they want to promote a new drug like Bijuva, I think it's called,
Yeah.
their version of bioidentical hormones. They started coming out with that at the same time they started talking about how transdermal progesterone wasn't effective, only their oral bioidentical one was.
Yeah.
It's
And
like,
Chris is asking that. Chris is saying, if understood right, topical progesterone does protect the uterus. Exactly, Chris. Yes, it does. It's just we've got this pharma. There is no pharma version of that. So,
well, let me clarify that.
yeah.
Great question.
Yes.
Appreciate your,
Great.
your comment too.
Yeah.
If it's the same Chris, I don't know. Jill.
Yeah. It is Chris. Chris. Yeah.
What I said earlier is we have years of having endometrial protection, but every woman is responsible for her own medical care, and the women we've seen, and all of you. So you have to get that endometrium checked occasionally. If there's any excessive bleeding, it's got to be checked. And you have to see a good doctor, a really good gynecologist can feel if the endometrium feels healthy. And not always. And there are transvaginal ultrasounds. And if there's any problem, it's got to be looked at. We've
Yeah.
seen almost no problems. Healthy endometrium. But the key is getting enough
Yeah.
progesterone.
Yeah.
And most doctors don't give you enough. So you have to learn that on your own. I highly recommend reading the articles on my website and Carol Peterson's. She gets into everything. I get into very specific things. She's also
Yeah.
excellent on her website. So let me just finish up.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you why I think Jungian literature is so important for women. There was a wonderful psychologist in Toronto, Marion Woodman. She wrote a book called The Pregnant Virgin,
Okay.
and some years back, and it was all about these shadow energies in women. And if you're too emphatic, you're really scared of not knowing, right? And if you're too this or too that, there's always a shadow energy. And to become healthy, we need to integrate these energies, and that's a
Yeah.
big part of being healthy too.
Yeah.
And I've been in this, I've done a lot of exploring. I don't have a lot of regard for much of the new age thinking out there because it's very much like influencer energy. You can visualize your way to everything. You can have whatever you want. And I just want to say that that isn't true. That isn't true because we're each born into our own. There's a wonderful, I think, Sanskrit word from this old Jew here, parabdha karma. We're each born into our own karma, and then how we choose to evolve within that is extraordinarily potent if we want to become whole. And I just want to tell you, this book is absolutely amazing. It's called It's Not Your Money. I highly
Mm.
recommend it.
Oh, it's Tosha's,
Yeah,
yes.
this is by Tosha Silver. And I
Hmm.
want you to hear about this very quickly. Do we have time?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
Tosha is head of the Living Outrageous Openness Women's Forum that meets every Tuesday morning, almost every Tuesday. It's one of the greatest tools I have ever found. And whatever your own personal, mine is Judaism, whatever your own personal discourse is, Jungian psychology, you bring it alive in the Women's Forum. And there are a lot of men in there now, too.
Hmm.
And the beauty of it is to shift desires into preferences. And how do you learn to do that? You learn to do that by not being attached to outcomes. I wanted this to be a great talk today, but I couldn't be attached to how it was actually going to turn out, right?
Hmm.
We all have things that we want. It's a constant dance, right? And I love her work so much. It is so powerful. So if any of you are looking to be part of some bigger discourse, check it out,
Yeah, I'll put a link to
toshasilver.com.
her.
Yeah, I would love you to. And also, I'm going to end with that exquisite quote by the Buddhist nun Pema Chodron.
Hmm.
And I used this quote at my son's wedding last year. I loved it so much. And she said that to be fully alive is akin to being pushed out of the nest at every moment. And and if you're going to be fully alive, it's akin to being in no man's land all the time.
Hmm.
And that is the healthiest way for women to live. Get your hormones balanced and then go deep into healing
Yeah,
your own psyche. And it's a
yeah.
dance.
It
And
is a
you're always
dance.
in no man's land.
Yeah, I love
Me
that. I
too.
think that's really, really cool. Phyllis, I know Chris is just asking a quick follow-up question. Some groups recommend super, super high progesterone doses. How much is too much?
Hang on.
Yeah.
My
Oh, the
computer's
puppy
dying.
or
No,
okay.
puppy's
Yeah.
being good. I'm
Yeah. I
sorry.
know the puppy's being so good. And Chris, I just want to mention because you had just said, Phyllis, I think what we hear in NAMS and many other places, they sort of put the ceiling at really, truly 100 to 200 milligrams oral micronized progesterone. That's it.
So,
Where that is not what we're talking about
sorry, I
here.
was plugging in the
No,
computer. So
no.
Chris's question said, is,
So some groups recommend super, super high progesterone doses. How much is too much?
okay, you have too much if you get sleepy when you just want to be calm. That's all. That's
Yeah.
all you need to know.
Yeah.
And we have many women who use 400 at night and 100 hourly during the day if they're having an anxious time. And then they cut back when they don't need it.
Yeah.
But most of them continue to want it. It's very safe. It's extremely anti-proliferative, and
Yeah.
it's a diuretic. And molecularly, at this point in our knowledge, I see no reason not to maintain that.
Yeah. Yeah.
and when I say at this point in our knowledge, it's because we're always, learning.
Hmm.
We're always learning, and the best in science is not trying to come up with a final answer. It's trying to build on a working hypothesis. I think progesterone is the most important molecule for women. I agree with the doctor I heard at the International Menopause Seminar last year. It was one of the best things I've heard there, mixed, but they're much better than the North American Menopause Society. They're not as pharma driven,
Yeah.
and not as entrenched with their own stupid answers, such as bioidentical progesterone has to be oral, because it just
Yeah.
has not been our biochemical experience over 27 years.
Yeah, and Denise is saying here because Denise, I know Denise, and she's saying she had a call with Carol last year who recommended taking more progesterone during the day. And I think transdermal is something that's not on people's radar, but it typically is not going to make you sleepy. It's going to make you calm before sleepy. So I think that's Denise, to your point. That's why, and Chris, so that you know, oftentimes taking transdermal during the day, it's just I have found it to be unbelievable. Like I
Unbelievable.
just
Unbelievable.
unbelievable. And it was not on my radar. I was always doing oral and I loved oral. I actually love oral. I do oral at night, but during the day, I love transdermal.
Me
It's
too.
amazing. So
And I could say so much more, but I think we've
yeah.
covered
Well,
it.
yeah, we definitely have. Chris, and look on my, when we post the replay, you guys, I'll link to the other webinars that we've done because we've done a ton of talks on
The
progesterone. So
last
you'll get a
one,
lot of that.
I mean, literally, if I tell you the numbers of inquiries we've gotten just from that progesterone part two, it would
Mhm.
be great if I could speak on it in my hometown, but I haven't been asked to. So
Oh,
I pity them.
I
But
know. We are grateful though,
I
Phyllis.
pity
We're so
them.
grateful.
I've
Yeah.
spoken on it I have spoken on it here, but not in this recent time. And I just don't care anymore. I mean, I really know the value
Yeah.
of what we're putting out there, and it's a loss when women who are aging don't get this information. They're going to have a much harder time.
Jill is saying, do I understand a combo patch plus oral progesterone would be okay? But I think why wouldn't you just want to use an estradiol patch plus oral progesterone
Okay,
versus a progestin?
I'm losing power, so
Oh yeah, we don't
no,
want
I
to
don't
keep
know.
you.
No, I want to finish. Can you
Yeah, the
do
question just
we
is, I
do
think
we
Jill is,
do we have a minute for me to go plug this in,
yeah,
and
plug it in. Yeah,
you
sure.
guys want me to continue?
Yeah, we'll answer this last question for Jill.
Well,
Yeah, if you
I
want to
want
grab
I
your
want to
plug.
answer it, but this plug is not
It's
working. So
not long enough. Yeah.
let me no,
Um,
let me go right over here.
yeah. So I
Um,
think you're saying, Jill, so you understand. So you're saying a combo patch plus oral progesterone would be
This is an
okay.
important question.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, no, I know we always go over, but it's okay.
I think we're okay.
Okay.
This is weird. I never run out of power that quickly.
I know.
No, we've been on for a while.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I'm still getting that. Okay, let's just talk quickly.
Okay.
I've always said that it doesn't make sense to use both because the monster molecule, as Jeffrey Dash talks about, the combo pill, will block the receptor from real progesterone. But I have recently shifted into saying if you are using a synthetic progestin for whatever reason and you want to try real progesterone, as long as you're using transdermal, you'll get the conversion to allopregnanolone before the receptor is screwed up. So
Yeah.
we would recommend not using the combo patch. We would recommend using, straight estradiol and progesterone. What is the reason for the combi patch? Why is she using it? Just
I
for
don't know. I don't know if Jill, if you want to say, we don't want to put you on the
No,
spot
it's
here.
okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
would recommend, unless a woman is using a certain birth control, which all the molecules are not good, and including Nestrellis is not fabulous. It's maybe a little bit better.
Yeah.
We've had women have negative reactions to progestin. So, I think it's very personal. I think it's very individual. And,
Yeah.
I think now when I answer that question, I'm not quite as quick to say no way. I would
Yeah.
say it won't hurt you to try some transdermal or even suppositories, which work similarly, but not oral, because oral won't work.
Yeah. So she's just saying it was what was given to her initially. It's the only option her doctor would give her. And I've seen that a lot where they give them the combi patch, and I've never understood why they go. I think they think it's killing two birds with one stone, but you're not getting the progesterone. It's a progestin. So,
Right, right.
okay, good. Yes, you have a new provider, and she is going to try to understand how to best advocate for herself. So,
You know,
yeah,
and send them to my website and Carol's website because so
yeah,
many doctors are watching that progesterone part two. My book covers a lot.
yeah,
Jeffrey
yeah.
Dahmer's
It's
book
great.
covers a lot, even though he and I disagree on certain things. Overall, he's terrific.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Phyllis, thank you so much for. I
I
know
hope
Chris is
it
saying your
helps.
book is excellent. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here
Thank
and
you,
clearing
Chris.
the air and calming us. We can feel the calmness. I
Thank
feel
you.
the progesterone. It's like coming through the screen. No, but you just make sense of it all. And I know there's some biochemistry here, you guys, but it helps. It helps. I know we hear the more we hear it, the better. But
Yeah,
when you tell us about the molecules, it all makes sense.
it
You
does.
know?
It
Hmm.
does. It does.
Yeah.
And part of the beauty of what I've learned from Tosha Silver, unlike most New Age, she's not a New Age thinker. She's a brilliant woman.
Yeah.
She was a Yale literature major,
Mm.
and her father thought she'd become a doctor or a lawyer, and she became an astrologer
Hmm. Yeah.
first. And she brings the big transits in. I don't know much about little astrology, but she brings this focus to when you're stuck in a dilemma, instead of trying to just figure things out in your head, turn it over to the universe and allow the unfolding. And that's the essence of what we work on every week. And I think it's
Yeah.
incredibly helpful to women. I have people in there who say it's literally been life altering.
Yeah.
On that
Yeah.
note, I wanted to bring it up because it's so
It's so
important.
important. Yeah. And Libby's saying thank you because this is really, it's like our meditative moment. We're getting
Yeah.
at the end.
Okay.
Which,
I, I
yes.
I'm glad I brought it up. So
I know. I'm glad you did too. All right, you guys. Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you again so much.
no
We
problem.
will do these. We do try to do these when we can and or
Yeah,
if
whenever
needed. So if
it's
things are popping
necessary.
up,
I,
yeah,
I love the way you host, and I love talking about my molecules.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah,
you know, I'm very protective of them. I've studied them for years, so
yeah,
I will defend them the best I
yeah,
can. Okay,
yeah. We appreciate it. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll send out the replay when it's done. But for now, everybody have a great weekend and good Thanksgiving. And thanks again so much for being here.
bye.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.